going to mountain. They're following us and they're killing us. They got my mother and my father. Some of them, they are saying they kill our mother and my father. And we are start crying.
That is a resident of the town most recently taken over by Boko Haram, as she spoke with CNN. That terror group killed scores of Nigerians ahead of elections, with reports emerging that people in that region are in fact now being slaughtered like animals. Joining us now, Ambassador John Price and Ford O'Connell, Republican strategist, also here, and Ford will be with us most of the hour. Ambassador, first to you. You have spent a good bit of time in the diplomatic corps as you Skype in from Salt Lake City this morning. During your days as an ambassador, was anything perceived about Boko Haram being a threat anywhere in Africa?
Well, I served from 2002 to 2005 in the countries of Mauritius, Seychelles, and Comoros. Although we had a number of threats and other issues with Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram didn't exist at that time. It really started in 2002 with Imam Joseph to educate poor children in his madrasa. So the real Boko Haram as we know it started in about 2009, and they became very militant after that.
Ambassador Price, this is Ford. Quick question here. How do you think the Obama administration sees Boko Haram? Do they see it as an annoyance, or do they actually see it as a real threat to U.S. interests and to African interests at large?
Well, from my experience, and I've been to Africa countless times before and during my service and many times after, I don't think we're focused. I think that the group that we have, the military group called AFRICOM, which is Africa Command, they rotate in and out their military officers, so they really haven't focused as well as they should. I think the Obama administration, in my opinion, has turned their back on the issue across the Sahel, where not only Boko Haram is very active, but the AQIP, the Al-Qaeda in Islamic Maghreb, in the east, the Al-Shabaab. I just think we're sort of leaving it up to other people. Even in Mali, where I spent a lot of time in 2012 and 13, and I almost had an incident with the Islamists there. I didn't realize I shouldn't be there in a certain place. But it was the French that came in and predominantly helped Mali. It's the French that have helped in Niger. It's the French that have helped in Chad. And the Americans really are doing very little, in my opinion. They could do a lot more. It's in our best interest. It's a very big security issue.
Well, you know, Ambassador, it's interesting you mentioned the involvement of France, because ironically, in the wake of the attacks in Paris, it seemed the world, at least the Western world, was concentrating on that. Meantime, Boko Haram was executing, what, 2,000 Africans? Is there such a concern about the, quote, developed world that not only Americans, just the international community does not focus on Africa the way it should?
Well, Nigeria is a situation that could have been controlled beginning in 2009 when their leader, Joseph, who was an imam, was incarcerated and shortly thereafter killed. This really gave rise to the Boko Haram. You have to remember, Nigeria is half a Muslim population in the north, and in the south, it's Christian. It's the biggest populated country, and good luck, Jonathan and his military are really not doing very much, and we are not forcing them to do very much.
Ambassador Price, why is it that, what is it, General Rodriguez, the U.S. commander in Africa, says it's going to take a huge international effort to push Boko Haram back and to defeat them. What would that look like, and what would the U.S. need to do to help Nigeria strengthen its military to fight back with Boko Haram? How does that occur? What does it take the Obama administration to make that happen?
And John, about a minute to answer this, if you would, please, sir.
Okay. Basically, we have to admit that there's a global war on terror still going on. Basically, we have to admit that there is an Islamic radical situation that we need to address. And until we do that, there's no way that we're going to be able to get our government to be reactive. So we need to help them train their troops. AFRICOM has to become more active in training troops. We need to get the African Union to help out, and we have to really go after these folks all across the Sahel region.
Ambassador John Price, Skyping in from Salt Lake. Ford O'Connell at Newsmax Washington, thanks to you both. In fact, there are so many threads to this story, so many implications. We're going to ask you to stay, Ambassador, through the break. Wherever you're watching us, whatever you're doing, you stay with us too. America's Forum will continue here on Newsmax TV. Ambassador John Price on Boko Haram and the global war on terror. There's more ahead.
You've got to stay with it, Mr. President. When the military tells you something, General Obama has a very bad track record when it comes to making military decisions. He's overruled his generals on 4 separate occasions, and every time he has done so, it's blown up in our face, not just his face. So yes, I think he has been incompetent on foreign policy.
South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham with some stinging criticism of President Obama in terms of foreign policy. Let's continue our conversation with Ambassador John Price and Republican strategist Ford O'Connell. Maybe it's more of a sidebar, Ford, but when I hear Lindsey there on the Fox News channel, and we hear some murmurings in South Carolina, and we hear John McCain say, I support Lindsey Graham for president, is Lindsey really going to run for president, Ford?
No, I don't think Lindsey Graham's going to run for president. I think he's interested in making a statement. What I think he's most hacked off is about is Rand Paul's isolationist foreign policy, and that's why we have the tie-in right now with the war on terror. And Lindsey Graham wants to make the point that if it's not him or Ambassador John Bolton in there, they want to have somebody who's going to say, listen, people, the war on terror is real. This past administration didn't deal with it properly. We need to find a way to push these folks back and to admit that they are what they are, and that's Islamic militants.
Ambassador John Price, your portfolio largely diplomatic, but there is political mixed in with the diplomatic angle. It's interesting. The president just flew to Saudi Arabia this week, of course, for a memorial service for the late King Abdullah. NBC's Richard Engel pointed out that in reality, King Abdullah didn't like our president that much. According to the inner circle of King Abdullah, he just couldn't stand Mr. Obama. Why the urge of the president to leave India and go to that service in Saudi Arabia, Ambassador?
Well, first of all, Saudi Arabia has been a great supporter of al-Qaeda over the years. The Wahhabist doctrine has been spread around the world, and it's one of the most fundamental, and it supports armed jihad and killing of infidels. So I'm not a fan of Saudi Arabia, but it is still the largest country. It has oil, and it has a great influence. I think that they should do more to take on the ISIS group and all of the other situations. Yemen is a problem, and certainly Syria and so on. But I think that we're there to try to mend fences, but I think we need to do more than that to have real serious discussions with Saudi Arabia about not supporting al-Qaeda and not supporting all the other radical groups.
It was interesting a couple of minutes ago, Ford, you mentioned Rand Paul. Well, Senator Paul had an evaluation of the direction Saudi Arabia ought to be taking. Let's listen to Senator Paul, then we'll get the reaction from both you gentlemen.
I think Saudi Arabia, in 2013, 600 million tons of weapons were poured into the Syrian civil war. And a lot of those were Saudi weapons, and a lot of those wound up in the hands of ISIS. We're now back there fighting against weapons that some of them were ours, but some of them were our allies. So Saudi Arabia needs to step up and be on our side and not be provoking the situation.
Ambassador, it sounds like, at least there, Rand Paul is on the same page you are. Would you go as far as saying the Saudis have provoked the situation?
Well, I totally agree, and I know Rand Paul very well, and he's a very intelligent and informed person. Let me say this, that in Syria, the Arab countries, several of them, have supplied arms to Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula there, the El Nusra Front there, ISIS, and others. And so I'm not so sure that we want to go take out Bashar al-Assad. He's the devil you do and the devil you don't. But at this point, look what happened in Libya when we took out Muammar Gaddafi, and now it's controlled not only by Al Qaeda, but ISIS is in there. So you'll have the same thing in Syria, and the Arab countries all around are helping. So, they say they're not, but we funneled arms to the Saudis, we funneled arms to the Qataris, and these arms got into rogue hands.
And mindful of
Ambassador
that,
Price, how should the U.S. work with Saudi Arabia to basically better partner in the war on terror? You're saying they're not doing their job, but everyone admits their importance in this role in the Middle East, and obviously in pushing back on Iran. How does the U.S. better work with Saudi Arabia and better monitor them to make sure that this is accomplished?
30 seconds, Ambassador, to answer that.
Let me say this, that if the Saudis aren't careful, the Wahhabists will take them out because they're starting to get very militant. So we need to talk to the Saudis about getting their military and helping on the ground in the neighboring countries. And they need to speak up. We need to support them. And we need to be on the same team.
Ambassador John Price, we thank you for your time, Skyping in, as it were, from Salt Lake City, Utah. Ford O'Connell at Newsmax, Washington. You stay right there, because when we come back, we turn our focus back here domestically. Philip Stutz will be here to talk about school choice. Will it affect your choice of a candidate in 2016? There's more straight ahead here on America's Forum.